And Congressman McClintock, Tom McClintock, you know, you're sort of an icon for California. You've been in the Assembly, you've been in the State Senate, and now you're serving us as a congressman. And I just have to ask, yeah, we've known each other for so many years. What's the difference between serving in the Assembly, the State Senate, and now the Congress?
The eerie thing.
What's that?
The eerie thing about it
Yes.
is to realize that all of the debates on public policy that we fought and lost in the California legislature on public policy that turned this golden state into an economic basket case, we're now debating and losing in Nancy Pelosi's Congress. And the thing that was hovering over all the debates in Sacramento was at least the consolation that if the left actually destroyed California's economy, there were still 49 other states we could all move to. Where are we going to go if we allow them to destroy our country?
Let me do something a little different, because a lot of the standard sound bites you hear on radio, television, whatever, are very actually pretty boring for the people that are out here going to vote in this election. A couple of questions you might have some insight on that nobody else does.
Okay.
Where did the Republican Party go wrong, number one? And I know that's a pretty broad brush, but I'm going to maybe tie these two questions together. But you know, we didn't get here, we didn't lose the Congress or the Senate, either one, without some reason.
Well, of course.
So what do you think the main reason was for us losing as a Republican Party? Where did they go off the rails?
Republicans abandoned their principles and the voters abandoned the Republicans. It is not that complicated. The results of the 2006 and 2008 elections were not due to the fact that American voters abandoned Republican principles. They looked at Republicans and decided Republicans had abandoned Republican principles. Republicans promised to rein in all of the deficits, to reduce the burdens that government's placing on our families, to reduce the crushing regulations that are destroying commerce, to secure our borders. And they did exactly the opposite. Why is anybody surprised? The voters threw them out.
Well, let me ask this. As we said, you know, you just lost the Congress and then it was gone. But let's ask this question. First of all, I'm going to ask you particularly. One, did you vote for TARP or against it?
Oh, well, I wasn't in the Congress then, but I certainly stood against it on the campaign trail.
Were you around when they had the stimulus package come out?
Oh, yes, and I was one of a united House Republican conference to oppose the stimulus bill.
All right. What do you think of your fellow Republicans that voted for those two items?
I don't think we had any Republicans vote for the stimulus. I think that the Republicans who voted for TARP made a huge mistake. A lot of them paid the price for that mistake at the ballot box. Those who survived are sadder and wiser.
One of the things that was
and scared to death of the Tea Party movement.
Well, that's exactly where I was going with that, because in other words, like Topsy, that grew out of the fact that and I'm not too sure whether or not all of the Republicans voted 100% against the stimulus. I think there were some that did vote for it. Are you sure?
I don't recall any voting for the stimulus.
None in the Congress that you know of?
We had one vote for Obamacare and a handful vote for cap and
What about Dreyer and Campbell?
They stood with us on those.
Okay. At any rate, the bottom line is that the Tea Party did become fruitful after these two votes, and of course Obamacare, a variety of other things that came about. So my question to you is, we've got a party, but who's leading it?
You know, in times of crisis throughout American history, the country's been saved by the American people standing up on their own and telling their leaders to lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Right.
What's saving America is not America's leaders, it's America's people. One by one, individual Americans are beginning to sense that their country is drifting into grave danger, and one by one, those Americans are standing up. There's a very poignant tale of Abraham Lincoln on his inaugural train from Springfield to Washington, stopping in what was then the little town of Indianapolis. They stopped to reprovision the train, and during that break, Lincoln came out to visit with the small crowd that had gathered. And somebody took down these words. He said, "Of the American people it may be said, when they rise united in defense of their freedom and their union, the gates of hell shall not prevail against them. I appeal to you, fellow citizens, constantly to bear in mind that not with the President, not with the office holders, but with you is the question, shall the liberties of our nation be preserved to the latest generation." We are watching that leadership emerge.
One second, Ron. At lunch today, you mentioned the Reagan Revolution. Could you give us the comparison that you said at lunch today about the Tea Party?
Oh, well, what is the Tea Party? Pollsters tell us about 60% of it is Republican, but 20% is independent, and another 20% of Tea Party members are Democrats. Now, before the Tea Party movement, we had another name for such a phenomenon. We called that the Reagan Coalition, and we're watching it come alive again in a new generation.
One of the things that is disturbing, if you look at the numbers, are if you look at every luminary in the Republican Party, from Sarah Palin all the way down to Newt Gingrich. I know, no, but having said that, there was no pun intended. But anyway, having said that, the whole litany of Republicans that are available for leadership, there's no distinct leader coming out of it. It's all like in single digits almost.
Well, my experience has been people that you normally talk about for an election 2 years ahead of that election are very seldom the same people you're talking about 2 weeks before that election. History summons people, and that process hasn't begun yet. What I do know is this: we have got some absolutely remarkable leaders available on the Republican bench. I wonder if there's a time in recent memory when we've had a stronger Republican bench. Newt Gingrich, Chris Christie, you mentioned Sarah Palin. We have a number of governors who've distinguished themselves in fights against the public employee unions.
You know, we're here with one of my favorite people on the planet, Bill Saraceno, who is an old schoolmate of mine from 1959 or 60, one of those two. Anyway, we go back sometime, and you know, it's a joy to see you, first of all, sir.
Thank you.
And we're here at the Western CPAC, and you were here a couple of years ago. We chatted
right.
about how things were or were going to be, and it's pretty interesting if you think about it, because that was Michael Reagan was here that year, wasn't he?
Correct.
Yeah, and we had some conversation about what the future of the Republican Party was going to be like, and golly, it starts all over again. It's like deja vu all over again, as Yogi would say. So let's start off with explaining to the people that you're not a congressman, you're not an elected official. You're very engaged in the whole political process, however. If you feel comfortable saying what you do with that part of the process, fine. If you don't, it doesn't matter. But the reality is that you've got some. You're as wise as anyone might be that's engaged in politics. So I'm just going to ask you this: where's the leadership in the Republican Party?
At the moment, it is very diverse, and which is not unusual for a party out of power. I mean, the Democrats know who their leader is. It's the president. 2 years ago, we knew who our leader was. It was the president, whether you like it or not. If your party has the White House.
Yeah, George and Laura, we knew.
And the Republican, then it goes down to the Republican leaders in Congress. And at this point, neither John Boehner nor Mitch McConnell have the public profile or persona that engages the imagination of people. That is going to change. The election in 2 weeks from this Tuesday is going to be a revolution. It is going to be a Republican conservative volcano that is going to spew out all kinds of personalities and new potential leaders.
I really have to tell you, I was I went on and I watched the Delaware debate with Chris Coons and Christine O'Donnell, and you know, I was all prepared to find what I call a bad Sarah Palin. What I found, in fact, was a good Sarah Palin. She's far superior to Sarah Palin in many respects. She's a lot sweeter, number one. Number two, she's a lot more knowledgeable on the issues. And I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I had completely distanced myself from the whole Tea Party idea until I saw how well she did in that debate.
Well, I think that the misperception about the Tea Party that you held, that a lot of conservatives held, is slowly being dissipated as you meet people associated with it. And the thing about the Tea Party is that it's a label really without leader. You ask, where is the Republican Party leadership? Who is the leader of the Tea Party? There is no 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people that are leaders of the Tea Party. That's a weakness, but it's also a strength. And the thing about the Tea Party people that has impressed me is that it reminds me of us when we were getting active in politics. I mean, you said deja vu all over again. I first got active in 1964 when I was in high school for Barry Goldwater when he ran for president.
Sure.
And back then, we were facing a calcified, moderate Republican establishment that didn't want any newcomers. All right, go forward 16 years to when Reagan ran for president in 1980 or 76. Conservatives were facing a calcified, moderate Republican leadership that didn't want any newcomers. You look back in Newt Gingrich when he became House Republican leader. So you'll never be a sneak thief, that's for sure.
Larry does that kind of stuff. He has a he's born in the year of the tiger. He saw a tiger in a china shop. No, it's okay. It doesn't.
In
doesn't apply.
1988 or 1990, when Newt Gingrich became Republican minority leader in the House of Representatives,
right,
he had to overthrow a calcified, moderate Republican leadership that didn't want any newcomers.
Right.
I don't have to hide it. They don't mind that I'm having my gin.
No, if my hand gets in the camera, then I have to get paid.
Well, let me tell you.
And my point is
yes.
Last year, the Tea Party are new people, conservatives, who are facing a entrenched Republican leadership that doesn't want any newcomers. Well, there's nothing new to this, but it is a very healthy thing.
You know what? I think what people miss, they miss the point that rhinos are finally being identified in the jungle of politics. That we finally understand that a rhino is something we can shoot at and maybe get out of office because it's not a real Republican. It doesn't carry the real Republican Aphrodites of what we would like to have happen.
And I am a very conservative guy and vote against. I mean, my first political involvement was Barry Goldwater against Nelson Rockefeller.
Right.
So I cut my teeth on inter-party squabbles, and I still do. And there's a certain. You don't have to agree 100% of the time, as far as I'm concerned, to be a Republican in good standing or a conservative in good standing. But the vast majority of the time, and there are some basics as far as small government, low taxes, strong national defense, respect for the individual initiative. Dennis Prager
Second Amendment.
has a Second Amendment. Dennis Prager has a great saying that the radio host, Dennis Prager, says, the larger the government, the smaller the citizen. And
That's true.
That's a pretty good
It's a good one.
sentence encapsulation of what I think the Republican conservative message is.
Now look at the people that are running. I mean, you got Bobby Jindal, you got Mitt Romney, you got Sarah Palin, you got all these people. And when people, I mean, the highest profile one of them all, of course, is Sarah Palin. But having said that, nobody's really out of single digits. I mean, they're all just like, everybody says, who do you want to support?
It is basically at this point all a function of name ID and perceptions that with the exception of Romney and Palin, perceptions of, and even in Romney and Palin's case, perceptions that people have via the media.
How much damage? And I can be honest with you. I can't be honest with most Republicans, but I got to be honest with you. How much damage has Glenn Beck, Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, and all of these guys done? What do they understand that they're really hurting the party?
Well, you see, I don't know that they seriously. People will argue. I don't know that they've done any damage. I mean, I don't agree with all of them. I think that they each have their own weaknesses, but I wouldn't say that O'Reilly or Beck or Hannity or any
Yeah,
of
but
them.
you know
I
what?
mean,
The one thing that Republicans always had be above the Democrats every time was logic. They actually had logical arguments with that they could talk about. And when you're talking about Glenn Beck going, I came to the mountain, I saw God, and he said, get a bunch of Republicans together. No, I don't think that flies. I don't think that when Sarah Palin goes, oh, we have to stand by our basic values. Well, whose basic values? And you better enunciate them pretty quickly to tell me that those are my basic values.
Well,
so what I'm getting at is that there are a lot of arguments out there in the mass media that are saying to us what we should be thinking, and it always reminded me so vividly of all of those Dave Von Ronk songs and all these marching songs about how don't think for me. I can think for myself. Do you know what I'm saying?
well, that's an ultimate conservative point of view, and I mean, I could put you on the spot and say, all right, tell me something that Bill O'Reilly said that's illogical. It's not that you disagree with,
Yes.
but defies logic.
Well,
As far as Glenn Beck talking to God or God talking to Glenn Beck, that's a matter of faith. You'll never prove or disprove that. You know?
hey, no one's going to doubt anyone's faith.
Well, but
Who
that's
cares?
true. But you realize one of the things that struck me about the coverage of Beck's rally
Yes.
in D.C., which had 400,000 people,
Sure.
was that it was not a religious right rally. Most of the signs there, and most of the speakers, and most of the enthusiasm there was around issues, economic issues, and what I would call libertarian issues. Now, as a reasonably Orthodox Catholic, people talking about God and religion and politics doesn't offend me. You know, as a reasonably Orthodox Catholic, I don't have much in common with Pat Robertson or any of the fundamentalist Christians, because you've always had that religious friction. But the God in the marketplace doesn't offend me at all, and if it offends other people, that's too bad. Doesn't mean I agree with them.
It's not that, but the pretext of that whole rally was supposed to be sort of a quasi Tea Party enlightenment. Let's all come together and create this giant new reality of conservative thought. And
Well, I don't know
and
that-
I never got that. I don't know if you got it. I don't know if you read that into
I
it.
don't know that was the purpose. I frankly
Yeah.
didn't pay that much attention to it.
Either did
know-
I,
I know
but-
that it scared the bejesus out of the liberal establishment.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, anybody or anything that does that is my friend.
The friend of my
Ronald-
enemy is a friend of my friend.
Well, Ronald Reagan had a great saying that anybody that agrees with me 80% is a friend, not an enemy. And I think really if you sat down and you ticked off issues, that you would find that Glenn Beck and O'Reilly and you agree on 80% of the time.
A lot, but O'Reilly's not really a
Are
pro
they
Second
the most
Amendment guy.
effective- are they
Oh, Bill
the most
O'Reilly is not a
effective
pro.
communicators when it comes to persuading non-conservatives? No.
No.
Are they the most effective communicators as is Sarah Palin when it comes to rousing our base? Probably yes. But it's two different purposes.
Answer this question for me, because I know you know the answer. Whether you'll tell me the answer, I don't know or not. But you've
Well, I'll have
got
to
Bill
read-
Bennett.
Have
Wait.
to read the fine print of the contract to see.
All
what
right,
we're
okay.
gonna
Wait
answer.
till I ask you this. You'll get a kick out of this one. You got Bill Bennett. You got Peggy Noonan. Huh? You got Pat Buchanan. Huh? You've got Bill O'Reilly. You start naming these people. Is there something in common they might all have? Yes, there is.
What is it? I mean, truly,
Catholicism.
I don't put Peggy.
Catholicism.
Okay, I didn't know Noonan was a Catholic.
Are you kidding? She's a young Catholic girl in trouble, famous
Yeah,
for
you see,
the book. No, I'm just kidding.
Noonan strikes me as a lot more nuanced a communicator than the other three folks that you mentioned. But you know what? Ted Kennedy was a Catholic, so what?
I understand that, and so is Jerry Brown.
Yeah.
But that's they're all Jesuits, is what I was getting at, and they're all these they're all in
See, I was
that
educated
think
by-
tank
I was
process.
educated by the Franciscans. So
Never the
we don't
twain shall
count
meet.
Jesuits as real Catholics anyway.
That's true.
Who
That's
said we
true.
can't talk religion and politics on the same show?
That's right.
So anyway, let me ask you this. All right, here's the Tea Party. Here's the dysfunctional Republican Party. Here's a dysfunctional. The Democrats are sort of shooting in all directions, and still don't have anything to show for it. You know, really. I mean, they're in charge, and they're going, well, we're being picked on by the Republicans. Now, what kind of mentality is that? They're already in charge. They got the votes. They can do everything they want, and they're blaming the Republicans for what they're not doing.
Well, you used the words mentality and Democrats in the same sentence.
All right, okay. Now,
no,
listen.
Seriously, they don't have, what's the old lawyer saying? If you have talking about presenting a case, if you have the facts, argue the facts.
Right.
If you don't have the facts, argue the time frame. And if you don't have that, pound the table.
Yeah.
And the Democrats don't have the facts. They have nothing to talk about, so they are pounding the table.
I got
As far
you.
as what they've accomplished, they're going to give the jug-eared socialist in the Oval Office his due.
Right.
He has nationalized 1/7 of the economy in the healthcare thing.
Right.
That is an enormous step forward in making this country North Korea.
Are the Republicans, though, just baloneying us or kidding us when they say, elect me, put me back in charge, and guess what? We'll overturn the whole Obamacare.
If they do not, if Republicans become a majority and they do not carry through on some basic fundamental promises, and repealing or neutering Obamacare is one of them, then Republican ascendancy will be exceptionally short-lived. They're not going to repeal Obamacare because Obama will veto it, and we probably won't have the votes to override the veto. But here's what you can do. You can starve it to death. If we gain control, if Republicans control the House of Representatives,
Take
all
the money out.
spending bills
Yeah.
have to originate in the House.
Right.
You just don't fund it. You don't fund it, you say fine. If the healthcare czar wants to go to his office and buy his own pencils and buy his own paper and do his own typing, fine. But you're not going to have any money for staff. You're not going to have any money for programs. You're not going to have any money for travel. This is a zero line item.
Well, this goes back to my other question that I'm following right up on that. And that's, what do you think about Afghanistan and how long we might be there? Or how long we might, or should we be there?
Well, I'm of a couple of minds of it. One is that we absolutely had to go in. You didn't ask about Iraq, but I'll tell you about Iraq. That
No, don't tell me about Iraq.
Let me tell you about Iraq.
All right.
That knowing what President Bush thought he knew, and everybody else in the world knew, including
Bill,
Mrs.
now you're
Clinton.
not going to argue this stuff
The
again.
MI5, no. Knowing what, looking at the intelligence that George Bush was looking at, it would have been an impeachable offense not going into Iraq. That's my opinion, all right? However it turned out. Afghanistan, that is where 9/11 originated. We had to go in there and remove that government. Should we still be there? No. I mean, any student of history knows that the British and the Soviets both broke their pick trying to bring order to Afghanistan. There's no reason to believe that the United States can do it. What the solution is, I mean, I don't know. How you isolate it, how you quarantine that virus so that it doesn't rear its ugly head again. But I think that, frankly, if we could buy off the Taliban and say, okay, fine, you want to run Afghanistan? I don't care if you run Afghanistan.
See, Americans have a mistaken viewpoint, though. They think they can buy everybody off. And a lot of these guys are just dyed in
that's
the wool killers,
That's
and they
true.
just
But you
and
know
they
what?
well, they just want to kill for Allah. They have no clue
That's true.
about money or how much their opium crop's going to bring in.
You are right on some of the religious fanatics in the Taliban, but there are also business people in the Taliban who do care how much money their opium crop brings
But
in.
those are Russian mafia people.
And do care about
Yeah.
that. So we'll let those factions fight it out and figure out who.
Well, I agree with you 100% on the.
There is no point in continuing to pour money and manpower into Afghanistan if we can figure out a way to get out of there, but while we are out, make sure that you don't create the situation again where we have another 9/11.
Well, that's the Biden plan, and I agree with the Biden plan. I'm fully in accord with the Biden plan. We use special forces when we have to for large parties. When they have a big party, they're having a big thing going on. And most of the time, we just use drones and Predator drones and go in there and take out those that are necessary and limit our exposure. I don't think there's anything wrong with that strategy. Do you?
I don't either, actually.
Yeah. Well, okay, moving along. Let's get back to the local effects of this whole dysfunctional Republican Party. What do you see in your neck of the woods when it comes to candidates that are running?
You mean California?
No, I mean, I'd even bring it back even into Los Angeles area and say, have you seen much change at all?
No, sadly no. I mean, Los Angeles County is there's still 800, 900,000 registered Republicans in Los Angeles County,
Right.
and that's a fair number. But the demographics are such that it's a very difficult territory for any Republican. But I think statewide, things are looking up in all kinds of places, and I think the Republican candidates in LA County will do better than they normally do, but that probably isn't going to be enough to push them over the finish line in a lot of races.
Hey, Bill, let me ask you a question about redistricting. What is your opinion on it, whether it's for the state or for congressional redistricting? Should we
Well, I
take it
don't-
out of the hands of the politicians?
I don't know how the ballot propositions are going to come out. I know how they should come out, and that is leave it with the commission. Because the two times Republicans
The
have...
redistricting commission that we're voting on to
Correct.
keep, or
Correct.
what is that? To
Yes,
Props
Prop 20
27?
and 27.
Yes on 20, no on 27.
What is it? Yes on 20?
Yes on 20 and
No on
no on
20.
No on
27.
27, okay.
20 would put congressional districts under the authority of the redistricting commission. 27 would destroy the redistricting commission, give it back to the legislature,
Okay.
which is
Yeah, you don't want that.
the wrong thing to do. And the two times Republicans have gained legislative majorities in this state, as in after 1970 and after 1990. And that's both because the districts were drawn by special court masters. The authority was taken out of the legislative hands. And that's what we need to do again. And it's all we need, all anybody should want is districts where the day after the election, the number of elected congressmen and legislators basically reflects what the voters had to say the day before. That's not going to be exactly, but you know what? If Republican candidates for the state assembly get 54% of the vote, they ought to get close to 54% of the seats.
Right.
And on the other hand, if Republican candidates get 40% of the vote, there's no reason they deserve more than 40% of the seats.
Bill Saraceno, we've run out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining us at the Western CPAC and Cutting Edge Talk Show.
Happy anytime.
Thank you,
Fellow
sir.
Trojan.
Gratefully acknowledging your presence here at Western CPAC. It's a very nice thing of you to do. We're honored to have you here because, we always feel like the second sister city, with either at CPAC or Western CPAC, but you're, in our opinion, one of the great leaders of the Republican Party. You don't show up on any, list of great candidates, but you are, and that's a big thing for us. So anyway, let's start off by saying that you're kind of have taken the mantle for the Republican Party of chasing after these things that are gone wrong in government. So what's first of all, what's your latest thing that you're doing, and why are you doing it?
Ron, there's no limit to the places in government that we can find waste, fraud, and abuse. But we're going to break them down into two areas after January. Those programs which are necessary as part of government, whether it's the post office or our armed forces, find the waste, root it out, get these to be organizations that represent good value. And certainly all of government has that. But more importantly, we're going after the big programs that in some cases shouldn't exist. The programs that fail, the programs that never accomplish anything, and they are endless. The amount of times in which grant money is not accounted for. We believe that there are hundreds of billions of dollars per year that can simply be eliminated from the national budget. And that's over and above, for example, Medicare, where the estimated $80 billion goes to things that either aren't bought or aren't needed.
Let me ask this: everyone would the buzz is, of course, is that there's waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare. There's no one talks about any waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security. I don't understand. I'm sure that there still is some of that going on. And then, of course, the money that we're spending in Afghanistan for the war. So there's a lot of money going out and not so much coming in. So what's your plan for helping us rectify that issue?
Ron, we've got to create two groups of people. Those who receive government benefits and understand they're receiving them because of need, and those who pay in and don't get benefits because in fact they're fortunate enough to be able to. Today what we have is we have a society in which people think everyone gets it. Well, only about half of Americans pay into the process. We've got to change hearts and minds. But you brought up Afghanistan and the war effort. I think we have to be realistic. War is messy, it's inefficient, there will always be huge waste when you're prosecuting a war. I think we can get significant savings in a cost of our armed forces, but that will be the cost at home. That will be, can we build buildings and improve our bases at a better rate? So there's money to be saved in the military, but let's understand, too many bullets in combat is never something we want to take a chance by not having enough.
One of the things that we're at a very pivotal time in the history of the Republican Party. There's as I opened the statement, I said, we really don't have a real leader of the Republican Party. We've got a lot of people that are running for things, from Sarah Palin down to Newt Gingrich. There's a lot of people out there that want to be in charge, but it's very difficult for the people that are voting in this election with the Tea Party. A lot of complexities to going on. What's your read on the Tea Party, where that fits in, and where our leadership of the Republican Party may take us after this election?
Ron, Ronald Reagan said that he didn't leave the Democratic Party left him. I'm not going to let the Republican Party leave me. The Republican Party is the party of social conscience and the party of fiscal conservatism. We need to get back to that. We need to force our party to be the party we were once proud of. Tea Partiers, for the most part, are Republicans or Libertarians. Either way, they belong under our tent, and they need to have a welcome mat that says, this is the place to come because your values are our values. Okay,
I'm going to switch gears here, because there's something I really have to focus on, and that is your effort. You're on the Government Oversight Committee, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. That has been an issue that I've been watching you vociferously on, about the banking issue, about the missing money, and all that other thing. All right, what everyone wants to know, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and no one's talking about, is, are any bankers or any investment bankers or anybody else that was involved in this whole debacle, are any of those people going to go to jail?
I certainly think there are a number of people who need to go to jail. Many of them are in government. Government had a responsibility. The Security Exchange Commission had a responsibility to stop Bernie Madoff. They had a responsibility to see that there were numeric impossibilities in some of the calculations. Additionally, there were people who covered up the collapse in and out of government, and we need to go after that. But most importantly, we need to really get to the truth. The American people have to understand there's a commission right now that has Phil Angelides and Bill Thomas heading it. that we have to make sure there's no whitewash of the responsibility in that, because the most important thing is that it never happen again.
Should the Republicans score a sizable victory in this November election, are there going to be certain changes to the makeup of the various government committees, and will that in fact do much?
My goal, if I'm chairman, is to fashion my committee in a way that it's never been before. One that has a whole committee just on rescission. What can we close in government? Government reorganization should not be about bigger government. It should be about consolidation or even closing of parts of government. I have a right to have 7 subcommittees. I expect to use that. I expect to have at least 7 people who every day get up attacking portions of government waste, and I expect that we will be successful, but we're going to have to be loaded to do it in a way that's never been done before.
You know, you're a bright person, and of course you were in the Army, so I have to automatically think you're very bright. But anyway,
be careful. I represent Camp Pendleton, so I happen to think that the other combat force is pretty good too.
Yeah, all right, okay. Anyway, those Navy guys, okay.
Oh, well, yeah. The support elements in the Air Force and Navy, you know.
Exactly. But anyway, having said all that, you represent an area of California that's had a tremendous amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in itself. The county of San Diego, you've got pensions that are going downhill, a whole variety of things that are more or less unsustainable, and it's a big challenge for you to help. What is for those of us in the state of California who are about to find that our whole pension system is going to collapse? What can Congress and our congressmen, individual, including you, do to help us dig ourselves out of this mess?
The American people make good decisions if given all the facts in a way they can understand and digest. The American people assumed that government workers had security but worked for the same or less wages than the private sector. Little by little, they're understanding that government workers have great security and work for more than people in the private sector, and we can't afford that.
So what would be your corrective action regarding these limits that we are you talking about new limits on pensions and of course the sacrosanct issues there are, you know, you got police, fire, and trash collectors. I mean, without that we don't have a society, do we?
Well, as you know, trash collectors can be privatized. Police and fire really can't be. So we do have essential public services that we need to have in California, but we need to have them on a competitive basis. Public employee unions have every right to organize, but they don't have a right to dictate more money for these groups than they would get if, in fact, they had to compete in a normal market. Public employment should be the equivalent of private sector competitive bidding. Today, it's dramatically more expensive. Today we could balance the budget in California if we simply were able to pay people what they would get in a competitive market. The same in the federal government. I don't expect that we'll change the pension system much in the federal government. It's much less generous than the California pension system. But I will tell you one thing, we've got to get prices where to get a good person, you have to pay more, we have to pay more. But to get a good person, and you can get them for less, we have to find a way to make sure we get them for less. We can no longer assume that you create a slot number and it pays what it pays, because it almost always pays too much.
Listen, I'm taking too much of your time, but I can't let you go without some issues here that I know that you're very passionate about. And one of them happens to be on the war in Afghanistan, and whether you think, here's a couple of broad brush questions they ask. First of all, there's talk about downsizing. Downsizing our military. Secretary Gates has been talking about doing that. Number 2 is, are we going to remove our troops from Afghanistan? Are we going to use the Biden program to control the Taliban? I mean, there's a lot of issues out there regarding this theater of operations and what you think might be the best way to do it.
Well, first of all, the Gates proposal, the 100-100 program, or 10-10 program to save $100 billion, I think is ill-conceived, and I don't think it's going to work. He's looking at increasing the size of contracts and reducing the number of contractors overseeing it. I think that's wrong-minded. I think we have to have good oversight on what we buy for the government, and we need to make sure that we buy in small enough packages that more companies can compete. So Secretary Gates and I disagree on that, to say the least. When it comes to Afghanistan, Afghanistan's a country we can never win a war in. It's a country where the war is won by empowering the individuals, making them accountable and responsible for their own country, and then exiting, but keeping an eye on their trafficking in drugs and on the rebirth of terrorism. Let's understand one thing. The money that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda are spending in Afghanistan is mostly regional money. They're spending money and doing a very good job of fighting, while the Afghans claim that they need 100 times more of our money and training and sophisticated weapons in order to succeed. Candidly, if they're not willing to fight with the same weapons on the same grounds and give up the same blood as their adversaries, then they don't deserve a country. And if they want a country, we need to make them pay for it, mostly with their own lives. That's where President Karzai doesn't get it. His Swiss bank accounts and his corruption is all about being empowered by this administration to let him do what he wants to do because, quote, they don't want to lose the war. There's nothing etched in stone that says Karzai should finish out his term. If he wants to finish out his term, he better start taking on his enemies with real blood and not with money in Swiss bank accounts.
Lastly, I'm going to follow up on that. And the big thing is, that would that take an edict or a technology from President Obama saying, you know, we're not going to nation build here anymore. We've reached the limit of nation building and we're now going to move on and move out.
The Commander-in-Chief has the authority to do everything I said and more, but it is going to take somebody willing to go see President Karzai and saying, the American people have a limit. We will fund your effort to be free. We will fund your effort to build institutions. We will not fund your effort to fund your Swiss bank account.
Congressman Gerald, I said, you know, I just feel so bad because you're like an Encyclopedia Britannica, and I've covered this whole umbrella of ideas and thoughts, and only you could do this. So anyway, we're honored to have you with us. Thank you so much for attending the Western CPAC, and we can't thank you enough. Best of luck in leading our Republican Party in the future. We want you out there as the flag bearer.
God save our country. We'll do it
and
together.
we'll be the first one to support you. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Mr. John Gizzi is the political editor and for Human Events. Is that correct?
And White House correspondent.
And White House correspondent. You're right there in the mix of it all, huh?
Yes.
How exciting! So how's that old lady doing over there after her Flapola, our famous the famous lady from the Congress? Is she out now?
Helen Thomas is out now.
Oh.
And again, it was a stunning development. Stunning because so many of us have heard her say the same things in outbursts during briefing film and broadcast to the world, which is what happens in these days of gotcha journalism and instant communication.
Right.
Shock to many. And that's what led to her exit just before her 90th
She was always just
birthday.
an honest person, kind of, huh?
Well, she had a definite viewpoint that she always shared with everyone, whether you agreed with it or not. And I've heard versions of what she said many times from Helen Thomas.
Well, let me ask a couple. Let's step back here just a second. You're here at the Western CPAC conference.
Yes.
So what brought you here? What's your mission statement for this event?
Well, my mission statement is obviously to be a speaker, but also California has always been very high on the list of things that Human Events covers. I've been coming out to the state for 18 years, and this year you have an important race for the Senate, for the governorship, as well as a very important congressional district right here in Orange County that the New York Times wrote about yesterday. And it looks very much as though Van Tran will defeat Loretta Sanchez.
Interesting. One of the things that of course, in part of this whole mix of things that are going on in our country right now is the Tea Party, and I'm sure that you're quite aware of all of these things and of what's going on. Is there an impact to California as you see it from the Tea Party? Are we going to have an impact here in California?
Very much so. And again, I cite the fact that Van Tran may well win the 47th district,
Yes.
and in the 15th district in the San Joaquin Valley, David Harmer could well unseat Congressman Jerry McNerney. Now, that said, The Tea Party movement and the people becoming involved in politics are a big part of that formula. This is the reason that in a state which very rarely ousts Democratic House members, two may go down, because people who are strongly believing in less government and greater freedom are being mobilized. And you see it right here. I met a lady this morning, Jackie Meredith from San Pedro, who goes to Tea Party meetings on her walker. I talked to a young lady, Lynette Choi, in a college Republican group, getting very active and mobilized. This is a kind of spirit out there, a wave that's being caught, and the Tea Party movement is a big part of it.
One of the things that happened recently was that, of course, Sarah Palin had been the key lead dog in this whole process after for the Republicans. But you know, she can't muster a lot of full support, but she makes a big difference when she decides to endorse someone. One of the things that happened recently that I was personally impressed with was what Christine O'Donnell was able to do against Chris Coons in the Delaware debate. And I was expecting sort of a bad Sarah Palin, but instead we got a good Sarah Palin, a sweeter person, very knowledgeable on the issues and so on. Is this I mean, what do you think of Christine O'Donnell, I guess, is the real question.
Well, I met Christine O'Donnell twice before she was the nominee for the Senate, and I will admit, I bought the party line that Congressman Mike Castle, a former governor of the state, would be the nominee.
Right.
So I was as surprised as anyone was when Miss O'Donnell won. Now, as to why she might win, remember, this is a year when a lot of people who are expected to lose wind up winning. Joe Miller in Alaska, for example. Sharon Engel in Nevada, who had lost her last two trips to the polls and now emerges as the nominee against Harry Reid. Christine O'Donnell is just the latest case in point. Never make predictions, especially about the future.
Sure.
And on the other hand, this race is so close at this point. There are so many people
Too
who
close
are
to
going to
call.
turn out
Yeah.
that you just can't say, but it wouldn't surprise me if she won.
Let me ask this: you're right there in the middle of it, being on the as a White House correspondent,
Yes.
and also you get. I think you might have a better feel for it than we do out here. On who would you guess if you had to push and say what your very best guess would be for the leadership of the Republican Party, and we had to have a election November 2nd for president, who would that person be? To your best guess.
All right. I believe with all my heart that the nominee of the Republican Party will not be any of the names that you and I would talk about normally or that would come up at a conference such as the Western CPAC. I compare the period we're in to the 1930s as far as the Republican Party is concerned. In the 30s, they went through 4 straight elections in which they lost ground. And by 1937, they had 17 seats in the Senate, less than a third of the House, and a handful of governorships. Then FDR made 2 critical errors. He raised taxes before the Depression was over, and that short-circuited the recovery, and then tried to pack the Supreme Court. And this led to a 1930s version of the Tea Party movement, rallies being held to denounce the dictator bill, as they put it. And in 1938, Republicans made such a resurgence, gaining 79 seats in the House and coming back in the Senate to the point where if the South were in any way competitive then, they would have won Congress. That also cleaned out a lot of the deadwood left over from the Depression, so that in 1940, the major candidates for nomination for president were someone who'd been a senator less than 2 years, Robert Taft.
Oh yeah, Robert Taft.
A 38-year-old district attorney from Manhattan, Tom Dewey,
Right.
and the eventual nominee who had neither held nor sought office before,
Wendell Lukey, yeah.
And that is a roundabout journey down memory lane of saying that the Republicans in 2012 will nominate someone we're probably not discussing today.
Interesting. Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting election, a midterm election. the prevailing wisdom is that Republicans are going to take back the House and the Senate. Is that true or not?
Well, I'll make an exception for you, my good friend. Ron, I am going to predict right on the air.
Okay.
And again, I do the same in the pages of Human Events, but you're getting a heads up. In the Senate, Republicans will make a net gain of 10 seats. And that does not include the race you mentioned in Delaware, the race here for the Senate in California, or in Washington State. In the House of Representatives, I have not analyzed the trends nationally the way Scott Rasmussen did. I've looked at it district by district. Right now, Republicans will win, I believe, a minimum of 42 seats, 3 more than needed to control. However, if the tide is strong, if the turnout among the Tea Party adherents is very big, it can obviously go higher, perhaps as high as the 55 seats that Mr. Rasmussen spoke about. One more thing. My wife is from Michigan, and there Congressman John Dingell, who's been in the House 56 years, the nearest thing to eternal life on earth, is trailing his Republican opponent.
Wow.
In the district I grew up in and where my mom and dad still live, Hartford, Connecticut, it has been Democratic since 1958. Young lady who's running on the Republican line is within 10 points of Congressman John Larson, Vice Chairman of the Democratic Conference in the House.
You know, one of the things that we're hearing is no incumbents. The Republicans have failed not as much as the Democrats in Congress. When I hear, on the various news programs how many House seats we're going to take over, part of the answer is, I won't vote for the incumbent, but do we have good enough candidates that can defeat them?
Yes. This has been one of the most exhilarating parts of my career as a political reporter, and that is doing our Races of the Week feature highlighting congressional districts. You have the most unique and original group running and very likely to be elected to the House and the Senate on the Republican ticket. These would include Dr. Bob Steele running against Congressman Dingell in Michigan, Assemblyman Van Tran, whose parents fled tyranny in Vietnam for him to be raised in the United States and go on to practice law and have a political career, to Tim Scott, a young state legislator in South Carolina, a conservative who happens to be African American, who's very likely to win the Charleston seat. In Indiana, the very likely winner in the open 4th district is the Secretary of State, Todd Rokita, who argued all the way to the Supreme Court successfully that the Hoosier state has the right to require a photo ID to vote. And by the way, he has another credential. Todd, 18 years ago, was my intern. He'll be the only member of Congress who calls me Mr.
All right, listen, I got to get this question in before the end of this interview. Very important. Do you believe then, after this election, they will be able to quantify the Tea Party to the point where, we've got Congressional Black Caucus, Congressional White Caucus, whatever it is. Are we going to have a Congressional Tea Party caucus?
It wouldn't surprise me. The Tea Party is as accepted, if not more, than organized labor has been in the Democratic Party. And when people talk about them taking over the party, what I always ask is, why did the Democrats never complain about the strength of the unions or the anti-war movement in the 60s and the MoveOn.org movement today?
Right.
Republican Party activists seem very open to the idea of welcoming new blood. Mm-hmm. And I would just say that any organization that does not reach out and bring in new blood and new people runs the risk of going the way of the dinosaur and the pterodactyl.
All right. One of the things that's hard for us to get a grip on, I mean, we've asked congressmen, we've asked senators, and we still can't get a real feel for it. Maybe you can give us a better idea. This election goes forward, Republicans retake control.
Yes.
What's their agenda? What are the issues? What are the top 3 issues they're going to track?
As Ross Perot used to say, I'll soundbite it.
All right.
First, repeal of Obamacare and replacement of it with genuine health care reform that includes tort reform and the ability to buy health insurance across state lines, thus giving competition to the system. You know from business that whenever you have competition, prices go down. and not a one-size-fits-all plan. Second, a good hard look at entitlements, and that includes Medicare and, yes, Social Security, and changing the way that we function and what we take for granted. David Cameron, the Prime Minister of Britain, has done this and is guiding his country through a sea of red ink right now. We've got to do the same here, and I believe Congress will
Essential
do it.
in that is, wasn't that the extension of the age thing to extend, before you can collect things, you'd have to add some years on to the program for, like, for Social Security I'm talking about?
Well, certainly that's a part of it right
Right.
now. I also believe that Congress will have to pass something, like, for example, a suspension of the capital gains tax for a year, or a severe reduction in it, and of course, extension of the tax cuts.
The Bush tax cuts.
Exactly.
And that's for all categories.
All categories.
All right.
Because again, as Congressman Issa pointed out, pretty soon, if you go on this way that we are, fewer people will pay the bulk of taxes. Now, President Obama can veto this, or he could compromise and reach out the way President Clinton did. My guess is he will veto it, and you will have gridlock on steroids. Now, that said, that will also put the issues and clarify them for the voters and create the topics that will be for debate in 2012.
John Gizzi, you have been a great guest, and we appreciate it so much. Thanks for appearing on the Cutting Edge and also at the Western CPAC. We really, we genuinely appreciate your interest and effort. Well, we're going to be monitoring you in the future, and we'd love to have you back on the program anytime.
Call on me anytime. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
We're with the very famous Richard Viguerie, one of the most outstanding conservatives in American history, we think. There's very few people, I think, can compare to you, sir, as far as your dedication to the conservative causes over the years. We're here at the Western CPAC, and we're just as honored as we can be to have you on the Cutting Edge, a talk show, and maybe answer a few questions about the conservative things that you've been doing recently and about why you're here at the event.
Great. I've been looking forward for months to come out here and be with y'all. So,
well, we always feel like the little sister, you know, we're always,
sure.
the regular CPAC East Coast is always different. At any rate, listen, first of all, there's a variety of things that you do as a conservative activist. That you have a newsletter, you have an organization, you do mailing campaigns, you're involved in just a whole plethora of great endeavors. Can you tell us what you're up to now?
certainly. I started. I came to New York as executive secretary of Young Americans for Freedom in 1961, and stayed for 3 years. And in 1965, I started my marketing advertising company. And in those days, nobody was doing direct mail to market ideological political causes, and so for 15 years I had no competition, right or left, so to speak. But after I did that for about 5 or 6 years, I got kind of discouraged, quite frankly, because I was helping grow this organization, get subscriptions for this magazine, sell these books, raise money for these candidates and causes, organizations. But our cause was not growing. In fact, we were kind of going downhill. It was dark days for conservatives after.
This was in what years now?
This was in the second half of the 60s, the early 70s. And other than what you conservatives were doing here in California, there wasn't a lot of encouragement for the rest of us around the country. We were all watching Ronald Reagan and hoping for the best there, but it was kind of dark days for conservatives. So sometime in the early 70s, I made a conscious decision to not only raise money, help conservative organizations grow with my marketing company, but I decided to play somewhat of a leadership role, try to wear multiple hats. And I've been doing that now for 35 years, I guess, and I'm still doing it.
Now, some people just say that you're just a kingmaker. You're the original smoke-filled room by yourself.
Well, hardly. Quite. I think the opposite is true. That through direct marketing, we've been able to involve millions of people in political process and public policy issues, working for candidates and organizations, instead of having a handful of people in a smoke-filled room.
Would you be
raise
so
all day.
kind? I don't want to have abrogate any security issues at all. But are there any of these campaigns you might just mention that you've done in the past?
Well, I started, maybe my very first campaign was for a young assistant district attorney in Poughkeepsie, New York, named G. Gordon Liddy, and that was in 1968. Also in 1968, I had one of my strongest successes I've ever had, but it went mostly unrecorded, so to speak, because we worked for a young person who was the education commissioner here in California named Max Rafferty. And he ran against Tommy Kegel, number 2 rhino Republican in the Senate, I guess. In those days, we didn't call them rhinos, but he was a liberal Republican, number 2 in the leadership. And so anyway, we ran a large direct mail campaign, mailed maybe 6 million letters nationally, 6 million letters in California, and he beat Tommy Kegel in the primary. Unfortunately, that was the night that Bobby Kennedy was killed, and
Right.
that victory went unrecorded. But
These were halcyon times here in California. You know, they'd taken our ex-governor Earl Warren and put him on the chief of the Supreme Court. You had, as you mentioned so eloquently, Max Rafferty was great, but then he later got defeated by Wilson Riles, a very extreme liberal guy. But this senator, this famous senator that was deposed, that you had something to do with, that guy was really one of the worst. He and Alan Cranston stand out in our minds as some people that needed to be out of there. And so at any rate,
And
so
we've had
this
the
is
pleasure of working over the years for Senator Jesse Helms, for Congressman Bob Dornan here from California.
Absolutely.
Congressman Phil Crane and Ron Paul. We did the direct mail for Ron Paul when he ran in the special election.
well.
back in
That's where I was
1976.
going with all this, because you know you're here. There's a Tea Party caucus or a Tea Party element coming into the Republican Party. I wondered if you were involved in any of that.
Absolutely. I spent a fair amount of time meeting with Tea Party leaders, speaking to Tea Party groups, writing about it, and I'm very excited about the Tea Party involvement in the public policy debate. All my political life, 49 years at the national level, I've never understood how we could turn everything around and go back to the vision of our founders of small constitutional government. I understood how, say, when Reagan was president, or during the early years of the Gingrich Revolution, 1995, 96, I understood how we could slow the growth of government down, but not reverse it and go back to the vision of our founders. Until the last 18 to 20 months, with the arrival of Barack Obama and the extremist liberal Democrats in Congress and the arrival of the Tea Party, I see how it's possible now that we can turn everything around. No guarantees, but we have a strong chance that we can turn America around and save America.
I was going to mention now, Christine O'Donnell is running in Delaware against Christine O'Donnell is running against Chris Combs. When I happened to be part of watching that debate, and she accounted for herself very well in that debate as a Tea Party person. And in fact, I was expecting a bad Sarah Palin, and I wound up getting a good Sarah Palin, one that I really appreciate and thought was, first, she was sweetness, she was very feminine, and she had her facts in order. And how can you beat that kind of a combination?
Well,
and fundamental, thoughts on good ethical values.
Well, one of the things that's been a real shock to liberals in this election cycle, 2010, is the rise of conservative women running for office.
Right.
Nikki Haley in South Carolina, and of course Sarah Palin in 2008, Sharon Engel this year in Nevada, and Christine O'Donnell, and many, many others. And,
Christy Noam, I think her name is, in South Dakota.
Right.
Is another one.
So anyway, I'm more optimistic than I've ever been in my life. And when I got involved in politics, late 50s, early 60s, I started out as chairman of Harris County, Houston, Young Republicans in the late 50s. And the conservative movement then in those days rested on a two-legged stool. A two-legged stool is not very sturdy. And the two legs of the stool were national defense, which really meant anti-communism, and economic issues, balanced budget, lower taxes, less government.
Right.
And we'd get 45% of the vote, 47%, very seldom we would get 51%. Then in the late 70s, we added a third leg to that stool, and that was the social issues, traditional marriage, traditional values. And then we began to get 51%, 52%.
What I was going to ask you is very important here. One of the big people that you, I mean, this goes without saying, but you know, you were really one of the biggest, strongest supporters of Ronald Reagan, I think, that came along. Can you tell us anything about your relationship with Ronald Reagan?
Certainly. Let me just say that a three-legged stool, though, doesn't allow us to govern America. We needed something extra, and that arrived with the Tea Party. And they are the fourth leg of the conservative movement, separate from the others. And what's different about them is Ronald Reagan, when he ran for president in 1976, said we needed new leadership unfettered by old ties and old relationships. Too many of the conservative leaders in recent times have become fettered with old ties and old relationships. And these new Tea Party leaders coming along, they don't have those ties. And it's very exciting to see finally what Ronald Reagan was calling for 35 years ago is now here.
It's a traditional new broom sweeps clean. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, that's part of it. That's
right.
part of it there.
Well, anyway, I know I'm taking too much of your time, but I do want to ask you this last question about the Ronald Reagan time frame. What were you doing during those years to help Ronald Reagan and keeping his agenda going for those 8 years?
Well, the thing that I and many others in the conservative movement were doing, starting in the early 60s, is building the conservative movement. Everybody to run successfully for public office, you have to have a base. And when Ronald Reagan ran for president in 1976, 1980, he had 1.5 bases. It was a little unusual. His half base was his wealthy California friends. His full base was the conservative movement. And so American Conservative Union, Young Americans for Freedom, National Review, Human Events, Eagle Forum with Phyllis Schlafly, all of these organizations, hundreds of them, were the underpinning of Ronald Reagan's ability to successfully compete for the nomination in 1980 and then go on to be elected president.
So there was no magic bullet.
There was no magic bullet.
It was just a lot of hard work.
Tens of thousands of people at the grassroots level providing leadership there, and it just unfortunately we lost a lot of that. But those were heady, exciting days. The late 70s, the early 80s.
Well, there's little to doubt what a motivator you are in particular, and why you've been so successful in doing what you've been doing for all these years, because you certainly will motivate the people out there that are watching this program to do more for themselves and to become involved in the process. Richard Viguerie, we just couldn't be more honored to have you on the cutting edge and on to visiting here at the Western CPAC. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We're here with Congressman Brian Bilbray from the 50th District down in San Diego way. Can you tell us the area, kind of your...
50th District runs from La Jolla up through Carlsbad to Oceanside, but doesn't include Oceanside, goes from the ocean out to Escondido.
Listen, we're just so thrilled to have you on the cutting edge and also to be visiting the Western CPAC. You know, Eastern CPAC's gotten all of the buzz, and finally we got some high-vis guys out here to do this, and we're really happy to have you with us. One of the issues, of course, that you represent most firmly is government oversight with Darrell Issa, don't you?
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about government oversight for a minute. You know, we've got a big election coming up in just a couple of weeks. We've got some Tea Party elements that may or may not impact. We've got a tremendous change in the entire Congress probably coming. They're talking 10 seats for Senate and 42 for Congress. What's going to be your agenda on November 3rd?
Well, November 3rd is to get ready for a big influx of desperate action by the powers that be in Washington to try to ram through stuff between the 14th of November and January 1. There is an agenda. It is a conscious agenda to try to do things after the election that was not politically acceptable before, which means it is a very scary time. No one is more dangerous than a condemned man. And there's a good possibility that Speaker Pelosi will be politically condemned at that time, and we'll see that her political life was coming to an end, at least as the Speaker, and try to get a lot of stuff done that would not been done before. We're going to see. I have seen, members of Congress announce in Mexico that amnesty for illegal aliens was going to be brought up and tried to be shoved through. I think that we'll see items like what's called card check, a special legislation for the unions. You're going to see a lot of the most radical items being proposed, and hopefully what we will see is that those more moderate Democrats that may have retired or have been defeated in the election will realize that President Obama and Pelosi cannot offer them anything that is more precious than their reputation and their integrity, because as somebody like myself who's lost and had to go back home, you not only have to go back home, but your children have to go back into your community, and you want to go. So it's a very dangerous time.
Since we're restricted in the amount of time we have, I've got a sort of a lightning round thing going in my head, so if you can be helpful in that regard.
Absolutely.
Let's start off with cap and trade. After November 3rd, what do you think the fate of cap and trade might be?
I don't think they can fly cap and trade, and I don't think that it'll fly in the future. I think that we can get enough Democrats to vote against that because of the concern of a lot of these termed out members that they may want to go get a job, and they're going to need to have businesses to hire them.
Okay, as you mentioned, immigration. What could be the results of the election on immigration
They
law?
will try to move the DREAM Act or the full amnesty bill. DREAM Act being amnesty light, but the fact is there will be a lot of pressure to try to move amnesty.
What about a new stimulus that they're talking about? The rumblings are out there that there's supposed to be some sort of a possibility of a new stimulus bill coming.
I think they can talk about the new stimulus, but I don't think that is as high a priority as items, other items, and other pressure groups.
Okay, finally, the other one that's a big one is of course, Afghanistan, and of what you might think we're going to do in Afghanistan. In other words, are we going to follow the Biden strategy, and when we get a big group of Taliban or Al Qaeda, go in there with special forces and then use the Predator drones for the higher level people, or are we going to be there forever?
Well, in all fairness, Predator's made in San Diego, so I love to see the war hero of Afghanistan being our Predator. In fact, if we could register the Predator for to vote, we'd run him as the presidential candidate. But no, we're gonna try to integrate the local village system into the political structure.
One of the things about this whole issue with Afghanistan, of course, is there's a side effect. In fact, to all of those issues that I just mentioned to you, that no one's mentioned recently, and that's called the Blue Dog Democrat faction within the Congress, and there's going to be, it's a little more complex, as you know. It's a little more strategizing because it's almost like fantasy football. You've got the Blue Dog Democrats, you've got the new Tea Party caucus, and then you've got
the Blue Dog faction, though, is going to be much smaller after January. Many of them are going to be
That's what my question
of
was.
the Tea Party battle, and mostly because too many of them, like CPAC, gave in to the political pressure of Obama and Pelosi, and the voters are going to exert a high toll on them. I do not believe that there is going to be a major factor of the Blue Dogs as we know it. There are going to be those Blue Dogs like Gene Taylor of Mississippi, who will be flying high because he not only was brave enough to tell Pelosi to go to hell, but he also was brave enough to do things like sign on to our amicus against the Obama administration when they attacked Arizona. So I think you're going to have some Blue Dogs who have earned the right to be able to be called Blue Dogs, but I think there's a lot of Blue Dogs who dropped the ball and became lapdogs for Pelosi, and the voters are going to hit them very hard. I hate to say that because a lot of them are my friends.
You're one of these people that's specially positioned within the Congress to really know inside baseball things, I call it. And one of them is, how much effect do you think that the rhino element of the Republican Party, and what are they going to change their ways at all after the election, or what?
Well, look, I think the rhino has been brought squarely into the lap of mainstream Republicans because the Obama administration, Pelosi, had been so extreme. The fact is that anybody in Congress who's not a left-winger looks very conservative because the agendas of Henry Waxman, of Pelosi, of Rangel, you go down the list of the people that are chairman now and what they're pushing. These are agendas that are so far to the left that those who you would normally call rhino or moderate look very conservative because they're voting no, and voting no very strongly. So it's made it very easy for the Republican Party to band together because the alternative was so far to the left that very few wanted to participate with that, even those who you may call very moderate.
Let's ask some last tough questions. And the tough questions...
Let me say one thing, though, about the so-called rhino. I'll just say this. I think all Republicans and all Americans are going to bless the day that the squishy moderate in Massachusetts won, because Brown was the only thing between our freedoms and a very bleak future. And when there's a right place at the right time for a moderate, we should not only accept him, we should embrace him as a tool against the left. And he's been able to do something that no one from the conservative side of our party could ever do. And so we won't be there all the time we want him, but I think we're all going to think about the fact that our grandchildren probably are going to have a better future because there was that moderate who was able to take the Massachusetts seat and, most importantly, break the monopoly that Harry Reid and the left had on the Senate.
You're very dedicated to the protection of our immigration borders. Along with that, encompassing that, a lot of times, are H-1B visas, expanding those, outsourcing of jobs to foreign countries. It all comes back to the pivotal energy point for us that are sitting in the hinterlands here with high unemployment rates. What kind of answers will the Republican Party have that the Democrats don't have right now?
Well, I think the first thing is proving to the American people that we're finally willing to do what it takes to address the immigration issue. And that's tell our friends who have been hiring and exploiting the cheap illegal labor of illegals that those days have to end. That we're no longer going to look the other way in a wink and a nod. That we're no longer going to point at the border and try to divert attention from the fact that the source of illegal immigration is not the border, it's illegal employers. And that means having to tell our friends that you can't profiteer from it anymore. And that's going to be a tough thing to do. But it's something that we must do, because until we prove to the American people we can be trusted to tell our friends they're not going to get away with it anymore, they will not trust us to do the kind of things we ought to be talking about. And that is developing true guest worker programs where people can come here, work, and go home, not come here and stay. Not a program that rewards those who have broken our laws. Allow those who can come into the country and create business to do that. But at the same time, eliminate things like the immigration lottery, which gambles with our national security, and bringing people in on some gambling system from the most dangerous countries in the world. I think those are, once we've proven to the American people we can be trusted with the responsibility of immigration control, then we can do some things that are much more logical than we have historically approached it.
I promise, last question. This is the last one. I really need to know this, though. Drug cartels and the effect of Mexican drug cartels on border areas, in fact, on cities across our nation. We're being inundated with these drug cartels and so on, and that kind of crime. What do you think that the Congress can do to ameliorate that kind of these incursions? And should there be federal laws that are related, or are there federal laws right now that are related to drug cartels and their prosecution?
Well, I think the biggest thing is understanding that the greatest war that is going on around the world is happening in our backyard. 17,000 people killed in the last few years. There are people being slaughtered every day that we don't even hear about. We have decapitations, we have dismemberment right in our backyard, and
Lots of
there- and
kidnappings
this is
too, right?
happening on our side too. There are events happening ours. So, in fact, they were saying Phoenix is the second largest kidnap capital of the world, second only to Mexico City. So I think we need to understand that. The one thing that we're not talking about is the fact that we are not only supporting Mexico in this battle for a good reason. We want to win this war in Mexico before it comes onto our soil anymore. But we must have a contingency approach to the fact that if Mexico loses on their side, what is the actions that we need to take to defend our side? And I think we don't do Mexico any service at all by playing politics with the fact that we're not willing to do what it takes to defend our side. Once we've secured our border, once we stop any illegal intrusions across the border, Mexico's situation will stabilize substantially. Because remember, the people that are killing the law enforcement officers in Mexico are making their money smuggling aliens and drugs north, and money and guns south. And if we shut down illegal activity of all sorts across that border, Mexico will be the biggest beneficiary of those efforts, and American citizens will be the second.
Brian Bilberry, Congressman from the 50th District, we couldn't be more grateful for you to step up to the plate as you always do, and speak what's on your mind. And we're so glad that you were able to attend the Western CPAC conference, and we're just thrilled that you could be with us today. Thank you so much. Well, we're honored to have Congressman Duncan Hunter Jr. from the 52nd District of California. And if you can tell the people out there, what's the expanse of your district?
The expanse of my district is from where the Chargers play football at Qualcomm Stadium, east to the Imperial Valley line, north up to Poway, and south down to Spring Valley. It stops about 3 or 4 miles from the U.S.-Mexican border.
Let's put this into some perspective here. You're is this an Iraqi veteran, or an Afghanistan veteran, or both?
I served twice in Iraq, once in 2003, once in 2004 in Fallujah. Then I was called back to active duty as a reservist and went to Afghanistan in 2007 during my campaign for election to Congress in 2008.
MOS and rank.
Artillery, and I'm a captain right now.
And you're still with what branch?
United States Marine Corps, the only branch.
Oh my God. Okay. Being an Army guy, it's hard.
My little brother's in the Army. My father,
second Army cap.
My father was in the Army. My little brother's in the Army. But my grandfather was a United States Marine artillery officer. So it went Marine, soldier with my little brother. So
we honor all of our service.
My grandfather and I say that talent skipped the generation.
Anyway, we're just thrilled and completely pleased as punch that you're here all in one piece, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, thanks.
That's a huge deal. Anyway, having said all that, you're really serving yeoman's duty, stepping in for, behind your dad. That's a heck of a responsibility just on the face of it. The family responsibilities have got to be really tough. But anyway, moving on from that, what we wanted to do with you, because you've got military experience and all that stuff, is kind of focus on the Iraq and the Afghan situation.
Okay.
Everybody picks on Hamid Karzai because he's...
And I'm going to have to run here in a couple minutes.
That's right, okay. But he's corrupt, or that you've got opium going on, and how much effect that has, and the opium trade, and on the people that are involved in the drug running in Afghanistan. Is it everybody? That's what we get in the regular newspaper. But what do you think? You were actually there.
Yeah, the problem with Afghanistan, I mean, opium is not the reason that Afghanistan is the way it is. Afghanistan is the way it is because you have extreme radical Muslims over there who want to kill people who aren't like them, and they're represented by Taliban and Al-Qaeda and different networks that work. Yeah, they're not always one and the same, and different networks that work throughout Pakistan and Afghanistan, destabilizing different tribal areas. And you have folks in the Northern Alliance that work against different Taliban groups, are the ones who went on horseback using our American air power after 9/11 and took down the Taliban for the very first time there in 2001. Those same people want to help us now. General Petraeus knows how to create tribal militias. He did so in Iraq, and they're perfect for Afghanistan. And what we're doing right now in Afghanistan is simply shaping the population and shaping the nation militarily so that we can leave at a certain point. And I think you're going to see a whole lot of fighting. You're going to see casualties, because that's what we're doing right now. We're surging and pushing, and soon we're going to start holding, and then we'll start changing the environment to suit the Afghans taking their nation over. It'll never be as nice as Iraq is.
Okay.
And what it's going to be is, it's going to be like the Wild West, but it'll be Afghanistan. But I don't think Poppy plays a role in that. It finances the Taliban to buy cheap rifles from the Pakistanis or the Russians. But it's a symptom of the problem over there. You have people in California with millions of acres of marijuana up in Northern California. So,
listen, we don't want
Yeah,
to
go
cut this
ahead.
time very
Sure.
short, because I've got to get these questions
Okay.
in. Number one is nation building is a concept. Now, whether we use that in Afghanistan or not is still to be determined. Secondly, Vice President Biden brought up his Biden plan, more or less, to use special forces when large amounts of Taliban or Al-Qaeda showed up, and then to use Predator drones or other types of technology to take out others. What's wrong with that thinking?
first question was
First
what?
one was on nation building, which is a good, or is that a good idea or bad idea?
It's a good idea if we can pursue it simultaneously with limited objectives. So we aren't there to nation build, but if we can help the Afghan people create a few hospitals and schools and create any type of an economy that can be worked by the Afghan people to get them off of opium and into manufacturing or farming another product, then that's good. But we're not there
Congressman,
to
how long
nation
might
build.
that take? How long that kind of process to take over Afghanistan and make it into a viable community?
Once more, I don't know, because we aren't there to make it into a viable community. We're there for a two-pronged reason, in my opinion. One, we don't get attacked out of Afghanistan again. Two, we don't destabilize Pakistan because they have nukes. Right? So once we accomplish those two goals, we are done. If we can help them out economically in the meantime, then that's great. But we aren't there to nation build. Afghanistan is not Iraq. It's going to be a lot harder, and we'll be. I'm sure that we're going to help them, but we're not going to be over there nation building like we did in Iraq.
Last artillery question, because this is an artillery question. Maybe you'll be able to answer this. There's a thing called the camel from Kandahar, which means that the Al-Qaeda get on their camels in Pakistan, they ride over the mountain, they go down to Kandahar, and they tell the local people, either join us or we're going to kill your children, or whatever it is that they're going to do. How do you, and I know that you were watching these people come over the mountain when they were over there, how do you take these people out before they reach their objective?
Well, we have special forces littering the border area. So that's how you do it. And we also have Pakistanis that are working with us now. Pakistani special ops, the Pakistani military relationship with the U.S. It's kind of strange because they have some people in the ISI, their Secret Service, that are anti-American. Then you got people in their military, especially their officer corps, that have trained over here at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, or at Fort Benning, or they've trained with Americans. They like us and they want to work with us. So we have them helping us out. Sometimes they undermine, sometimes they are a great help, but that's what you have to do. We have special ops on that border. We have unmanned aerial vehicles, predators, as we read about every day, about them crossing over sometimes into Pakistan against certain Pakistanis. Certain Pakistani people don't like that happening, but that's how we stop them. We stop them on the border. We have a border issue here in America. They have a border issue there.
Let me give you a little bit of background. We interviewed Gary Bernstein, who was a special op for CIA, and we thought we had this one back in 2000, 2001 at the time. Some of the problems he had, and he had the Northern Alliance, and there was a real challenge to get them to cooperate. But they felt that the State Department was not 100% behind them. Is there conflicts between the military and the State Department?
There's a huge conflict between the military and the State Department. The State Department, one, throws billions of dollars to Pakistan without requiring anything except promises, things that Pakistan breaks later. The DOD and Petraeus in general, and generals like General Petraeus, who understand that you have to trade for stuff. I would much rather give, if we have money that we have to share with Pakistan, give it to one of our military leaders over there and make them extract something from Pakistan for the money that we're giving them to help them fight terrorism in their their own nation. So, yeah,
Well, let me tell you something. I just have to say this right straight out. We're so honored to have you here. It's a wonderful thing, and too bad you're not in our district. We'd vote for you.
Well, thanks.
Because it's a great thing to have someone that's an American patriot come back and actually do public service that probably might be able to help something in the end.
Yeah.
And that knows something about what's going on. And anyway, so Congressman Duncan Hunter, from the 52nd District of California, God bless you, and keep after all the things you do, and keep doing what you're doing, and your dad should be very, very proud of you.
I'm proud of him too. He's a great American.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.